Hi, Karen.
Hi, Avital.
I'm really happy to do this conversation with you, where we can kind of talk about the upcoming course of the LBMS system, Laban Brotanief Movement Studies, here in Israel, in Pantarei Studio. And we're gonna talk a little, and I'm gonna ask some questions about this course. But first, if it's okay with you, if you can just introduce yourself and say something about what you do.
Okay, I am a movement analyst. I'm a master somatic movement educator therapist through ISMETA. I am a certified movement analyst through the Laban Brotנייef movement system. I have a master's in dance, and I was a tenured professor in the School of Dance and have taught dance in many universities in the United States. But currently, and for the last 20 years, I've really been focused on internationally teaching the Laban Brotנייef movement system.
And I was a very happy student of yours, so I'm really happy about bringing you in um, to do this certification program. I would love to ask you first of like, it's a really big subject, but maybe in a short amount of time to maybe phrase what is the Laban Brotנייef movement studies system in your words.
The system is a framework. It's a way of organizing the body of knowledge that is human movement. Because basically the body of knowledge that's human movement is not really often looked at that way. It's more looked at in specializations, dance, athletics, physical therapy. But just human movement is at the basis of all of those things. And so really it is the large frame of the body of knowledge that is human movement. And it is about bringing awareness to that body of knowledge and allowing people to enter into an experience with it through their own experience of their own body and by observing others. So it's really about the experience and observation of human movement in terms of really getting a deeper understanding about how essential that is to all aspects of human behavior and all ways that we interact with the world, with others, with the challenges of the world. It really is about coming into a profound and deep relationship with ourselves as movers, and movement as a way of knowing, right? That we use our movement in order to navigate the world, in order to express ourselves, in order to connect to others, in order to do all the things that we do, from the very, functional activities to the very abstract ideas of studying the universe. But it all comes from the fact that we experience life through the entity of our moving, living form.
Amazing. I was thinking lately about the word information, and it was really interesting for me to think about like when you're in formation in some sort of structure, the information comes in. There's like then you can understand what is this about. And I think what Laban did and Bertenif with them, kind of like they took something that is so abstract, movement is like so much, which we can move like this, we can move like that, we do it all the time, and they put it in a formation. So
Right.
you're gonna get this information that can actually be uh, be talked about, that it's
Right.
not that elusive anymore. It actually has a formation. Um, and that's really interesting for me to think about. What do you think is, or why is this meaningful to learn about the movement, of the body, the human movement? What's so meaningful about these studies the way
I
we...
think it goes back to that thing is that is the basis of how we are of our existence, right? That we live through our bodies. And we identify themselves both as being us, the container of us, as well as being us, right? So, I can look at my hand and think, oh, that's my hand. And there's kind of a separation. It's like I'm naming it. But in fact, it is how I am experiencing myself, right? Experiencing my agency, experiencing my choice, experiencing my volition, experiencing my individuality. Everything about how I am in the world starts from that experience of my living form.
Amazing. And I mean, the way I see it, the course kind of gave this really interesting place of exactly what you kind of said, where on one hand, I'm like, okay, this is my hand. This is a hand I can see, okay? Or like, I understand that movement is, the effort or something like that, but I'm also experiencing it. So there's
Right.
a reflective process that I understand things about myself through this knowledge. And that becomes like a meaningful thing because I can understand how do I move in the world? And how do others move in the world? And how does that affect everything that we do? And where does it come from? And I think that's
Yes,
another like layer of meaning that is coming to life when a person comes to study this program.
I agree. And I also think that it's very much grounded in having a language, so that you're identifying and naming what you're doing. So, we understand the profound way in which language allows us to communicate. We know that being able to choose the right words to share a language to talk to someone can be so vital in coming to consensus, of coming to understanding, of communicating on so many levels. It's not the only thing, but it's very, very much a part of how humans also structure how they interact with the world, is through language, and we language the movement, and that gives us the opportunity to really more deeply connect with not only what I'm experiencing that I can share or talk about or discuss, but also what I see you doing. So it gives us yet another vehicle in terms of how we connect and interact. If we both understand the same language for the movement experience or the movement observation that we're doing.
Amazing. And can you just say, I mean, this is big, but maybe in a few words of like how the Laban Bertanev system is kind of like divided, the four elements, and just a little bit about how, it came from body and space, and just...
Right. So anything that you're analyzing, right? What you're doing is you're picking, you're creating, you're taking a whole and you are identifying parts. So you're differentiating the parts of a whole. And as we know, movement is extremely complex. And so, it allows us to identify the part that is, well, what is moving? Oh, my body, my hands and my head are moving. Or my core is moving, my chest is moving. It allows us to identify the parts, which are very significant. It also identifies where they're moving. For me to do this is very different than for me to do this, right? So where I am doing whatever that action of that body part is expresses something. It has a function, it has an expression. So it allows us to have the space of that. So it gives us the body, which is the what, the space, which is the where. It also allows us to identify the relationship between those two things, which we call shape, because it's my body in relationship to the space. So I am bridging from myself to something outside of myself. Many aspects of shape in terms of the body-space relationship we identify and name. And then it gives us the very subtle, nuanced aspect that we call effort, which is the dynamic qualities of movement. Those are the tastes, the textures, why we know when someone walks into a room, or why we intuit, I would say, when someone walks into a room, that they're sad, or that they're confident, or that they're shy. We're reading that through their body, space, and effort, and largely their effort, which is the qualitative thing. Somebody who's walking in a way that indicates they're shy versus somebody who's walking in a way that indicates they're confident and outgoing. We're getting that through the quality of their movement, the energetic forces of their movement. And it gives us a language around those very subtle characteristics of movement as well. So we have the what, the where, and I would say the effort gives us the intentionality, and the why and the how, I would say, come up through the effort qualities.
Amazing. That was good for sure. We're trying to put this in a very short amount of time. Yeah, it's kind of like having different lenses each time and
Exactly.
checking those things. So who do you like, who are the candidates, the people who this course might really be effective and good for? I mean, I feel like it's for everyone, but we can kind of like who might be
Yeah,
more.
no, for sure. I think because we're all humans are movers, and all humans are observers of movement, because we're always making a lot of interpretations and decisions based on the movement that we're observing. So it's good for everyone, as you said, but I think that it's particularly good for people who already have some interest or awareness of human movement. Maybe it's because of their profession. Maybe they already are in some way engaged with movement. Dancers, actors, public speakers, physical therapists, all those people, athletes, all of those people are already involved in movement. But it also can be a teacher. I'm teaching, so yes, I have to move in order to communicate, in order to also interact with the people I'm teaching. And it can go well beyond that. I mean, that now there's a lot of interest in AI and all the things that come from our brains. So we have all the people who are interested in robotics and interested in the more abstracted creations that come from human movement. Those people it can benefit. And it's a both very wonderful aspect of the training that it draws in people from different disciplines, but it also makes it difficult because we're not trying to train someone to be a roboticist or a physical therapist. We're trying to allow those two people to see how human movement is effective and important and significant in both those professions.
Yeah, and you've seen all kinds of people who came to study Laban through the years.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you, or can you explain a little bit how does the course actually look like? So we're going to have 3 Zooms. One is going to be before the actual program, then, or like the beginning of the program. Then we're going to have 2 after, and 2 separate days. But the main effort would be the 10 days that we're going to have together in the studio. And how would that look like? Like, how would they look like? What kind of classes do we have? Yeah.
So during the intensive that the group gathers physically in the same shared environment, so interaction is very much a part of it. Yes, we are moving ourselves, but we also take the opportunity to talk with one another, to move with one another, because we understand that another thing that identifies humans is, yes, they have this form. I'm vertically upright. I walk, I breathe, I have arms and legs, but we also interact, right? So we as humans work and live and get into messy situations with one another. So we bring that in because that's very much a part of the movement dynamic, is how we move in interaction. So not only my figuring out, what's going on with my own rotation in my shoulder, but, how is this ability to shape myself in relationship with another important, right? So working with others is very much a part of it. So that's one of the reasons we, in the intensive, work together, rather than just having it be an all online or all individual or reading texts. We really think that the interaction is very important to the learning and the growth of the individual and the knowledge of movement as a body of knowledge. A typical day has kind of a body basis emphasis often in the morning, where we really get in touch with our form, really connecting to the here and now, starting with really foundational things like breathing, like really sensing our weight, finding grounding, seeing how the parts of our bodies connect to each other, the patterns that we both choose and those we avoid, things that seem difficult to us, things that come easy to us. So we go through a whole body of knowledge around the actual physical actions of the moving body. And then we go into theory of, the effort qualities, those dynamics I was talking about, the space of interaction, of communication, of work. And we go through theoretical structures and we do explorations, which are improvisational ways of finding aspects of movement. But then we also have theoretical structures that we give people to explore. And we give them given sets, what I would call techniques, just like when you go to a ballet class. You do certain exercises or certain sequences of movement in order to bring you into contact with its aesthetic, right? And so we also do set sequences of body actions in space, playing with the dynamics of those, playing with the phrasing of those. So we do those kind of things that back up. We warmed up the body, we went into theory, we pull those things together. And then we also do work that involves what I would say integration. So you're trying to be creative in finding ways in which you can further deepen your understanding and relationship to movement through exploring it in very specific ways through some kind of a structure. Where you're creating movement sequences and analyzing them. Maybe then you're changing them.
So there's a lot of I guess both the experiential and things that would look like a normal dance class experience. Then there are things
Theory and practice.
theoretical where you kind of learn in and go into the thinking area and understanding things from above. And then you go back again and doing it in relationship to other people and also improvising it. And then you come back right? It's kind of
Yes.
this whole sum of both the experiential and the theoretical that come together through the movement.
Right. And I think you're bringing up this idea that, our human moving form identifies the parts of ourselves, not only the body parts, but the mind parts. So is this a sensing part of me? Is this my feeling emotional part? Is this my intuition in around decision making? Is this my analytical thinking abstract part? And so we play with those different parts of our, if you want to call them mind structures, or I wouldn't even call them mind structures because they're also body based, ways of knowing. The ways of knowing. We can know through sensation, we can know through emotion, we can know through analytical abstract reasoning, we can know through a process of intuition. So, and we associate the movement experiences of those parts of mind or knowing.
Amazing. So if you can just say a little bit shortly about there are 4 modules, so what is each module is more about? Because at the end we're finishing 500 hours with
Right.
the final assignment. final project. It's 500 hours. Each module is like around 120.
120 more or less. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do we do with each module?
They are a developmental progression. And they, although even within that model, we have analysis and synthesis, parsing and discerning the parts, but then seeing how the parts connect and integrate and form whole. And so essentially that's a process that goes both wide and deep, right? But we start in the beginning with really the foundations, naming the parts, naming the components of movement, the body, the space, the effort, the shape, and exploring each of those and naming the subparts of those parts and creating and exploring movement through those in order to really create and identify what those parts are, to really know the difference between red and pink, right? You have to see it and experience it to know it. So we go into more and more detail, but then we also pull that back into, well, how does it exist in the world? How does it exist in my life? How does it exist out there in other people's lives, right? So that's part of it as well. So it's this process of identifying parts, building on those parts in terms of connecting them. In a way, I'll go back to the learning language. When you first are learning, language, and you learn the alphabet, you learn the letters, you learn how to write simple sentences, make the difference between a letter and a word, a sentence, a paragraph, and that all has to come before you can use the tool of language to write a poem, right? So that's what we're going through, that process of building the foundations in order to get you to the optimal place where you can really explore the potential and power of movement through a process. And a lot of it's based in a process of awareness. People are already complex movers, but most of our movement is not in our conscious level of awareness unless you have a pain or unless you're trying to teach someone a specific physical skill. Most of our movement is residing in a place that we don't have to think about. It would be very difficult if we had to think about every action we were doing. It would drive us crazy. We couldn't do anything.
I'm lifting my hand, I'm waving it, I'm closing it, I'm putting it,
Exactly.
I'm closing it.
I'm walking, I'm
But I'm also
lifting
doing
my
like this with my head.
Try tying your shoes and identify every single moment of that action. So, yeah.
So through the modules you get at the end, to a place where you can actually take this into your own world, right? So
Yes.
the last modules are more about kind of like bringing it in to my area of expertise, or seeing how that is actually related to what I'm interested in.
Yes, yes. And it also sometimes transforms people into understanding things that they didn't even know were there. It's often a very transformative process where people not only, have self-awareness and personal growth and development, but sometimes it really is very transformative for people to make a shift, right? Oh, there's patterns that I have that were not very effective, and I would rather do other things that would help optimize my lived human experience. So it's also has the power to be a very transformative experience.
Yeah, I can say it was very transformative for me, so I can definitely relate to that. Yeah, let's talk about something that people are asking all the time, and it's always, what is the certification? What is this, what do we get at the end?
Well, As I said, the premise here is that human movement is a body of knowledge, but it's not a very well understood body of knowledge, and it's becoming more and more so. I mean, think about how much the term somatic has become a buzzword, and
Amazing.
many, many places have somatic education and somatic experience and da 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 da. Right. So there's a lot more awareness of that. And so the certification allows you to identify yourself as someone who is knowledgeable and trained in the body of knowledge that is human movement. And then it allows you to take that into whatever area of expertise you might want to do. But it identifies you as someone who has a substantial understanding and experience of human movement.
Right, and through this kind of like experience, you can now, work with people one-on-one and
Yes.
say, we're going to look
Yes.
at what you need through the movement aspect, or, do a class of somatic
Exactly.
work with movement
Yes.
because of Laban's Laban Bertנייef system is a system you can actually take and do things, work with people with it.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I mean, the international framework that we fall under is META, which is the International Somatic Movement Therapy and Education Association. And really what META has been doing now for many years, but recently a lot, is really trying to expand the pool of people in the world who are sophisticated and knowledgeable about human movement. So they cover a big, broad spectrum of somatic movement educators and therapists. But it is, again, bringing it's like achieving critical mass, right? Of getting enough scientists together that they can solve a problem. We're getting enough, people in the field of somatic movement therapy and education, together to really have a critical impact in the world, whether it be in education, whether it be in city planning, whether it be in communication and negotiation and peace skills, lots of different possibilities.
yeah, and it's also part of, I think, why the word somatic becomes more and more
Exactly.
aware of. People are using it more and more
Right.
because Ismeta is definitely doing a big part of it. Um, yeah, I kind of have like this curiosity for you to say about like students that because all these like interesting expertise that people took it to. It's really, yeah, I'm just curious about, but if you have like,
Yeah, I mean, really everything. I mean, some people are very much in the artistic end of it, the people who really use it with artistry, often in theater and dance, although not limited to that. Music, a lot of musicians, singers, you know, people who are in circus arts. There's lots of people who use it in this kind of very expressive, creative way, either for themselves as a performer, creative artist, or in working in teaching people who are engaged in those enterprises. Then there's people who are very much interested in the, cultural aspects, social and cultural aspects. So people are interested in anthropology, sociology, psychology. And so you get a lot of people who are really interested in the movement parts of those things. Why is it that, people move in these ways in this culture and move in these ways in this culture? What does that say about the culture? Those kind of, parsing the differences and similarities. And then, we were talking about the robotics. I mean, engineers,
right,
all of the people who are working, people interested in prosthetic devices,
that could work, like how
right, right. All of these, medical technology has really moved into more and more of devices that have to move in interaction with the patient or client or, this kind of thing.
amazing. So I think the only thing I didn't ask about was like, how would you describe the requirements of the course throughout the course, the assignments, what kind of assignments, reading assignments, like what is usually um how do you say it in English? Expected.
Yeah, so we have individual assignments and we have group assignments. So there are assignments that are accomplished in small groups. There are assignments that are accomplished individually. There are assignments that require a written analysis. There are assignments that require more of a creative process. So there's a wide range of those type of things in order to get to the many levels, as we were talking about before, the sensing, the feeling, the thinking. We really value all those things. We don't just want to make people critical thinkers about movement, but nor do we just want to make people sensorial, sensing themselves and enjoying and indulging in movement. Both those things are really great, but we want people to explore how those two things connect or can connect. So we have assignments that foreground one or foreground the other, or try to bring those into some more harmonic relationship where you're required to kind of do both.
Right, and most of it is throughout the actual module, so people are working on it in the hours of the module, or they need to go home?
Both. We also, in order for movement to be an ongoing connecting process through the whole, there are also interim assignments that happen in the time between modules. There is usually one, sometimes two assignments that are done in the interim, which we sometimes start in one module and then they're worked on in the interim and then presented in the next module, or completed or fulfilled in the next module. So it kind of is dependent on each specific assignment. So, and some are more heavily movement based and some are more theoretically based, some are more creatively based.
Kind of keeping the thread in
Yes.
the modules.
Yeah, and we really think that is helpful to students to not get immersed in a module and really deeply go into a place and then leave and then kind of forget about it, right? It's a way of remaining actively involved with the material.
And they can also connect with the teachers if they have questions.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, we often structure things so that there are either, small groups that they have to check in with, or supervision, particularly toward the end with faculty. So yes.
Amazing. Maybe one last thing about the final project at the end of the program. There's a final project that a student needs to hand in. That is how they, you get the actual finish the program.
So there's an analogy between, a master's thesis and the final project. I would make that analogy for people who are aware of that. So that there's individual choice is really a big part of that. So do you want to do something that's very personal to your own experience, or are you more interested in comparing, analyzing? I'm a yoga practitioner and I really want to, really analyze deeply this practice of yoga that I've been doing through the lens of LBMS and come into more understanding of that. So the projects are very, very different, depending on the person who is doing it. I am a school teacher and I want to incorporate more creative movement-based explorations in my classes. So I'm going to work on developing lesson plans where movement can be incorporated into my lesson plans. It can really run the gamut from the very personal to the very theoretical. All of them entail movement, analysis, and synthesis. And they have to be personally meaningful to the person. There has to be a reason that you are really engaged in wanting to know something or do something through this lens of movement.
Right. And I can say that at the end of our program, it was so beautiful and really interesting to see what each person, chose, and how amazing, first of all, an experience it was, and how they kind of like took it to the next level. And it really made the synthesis feeling of like, kind of bringing this into my own world, understanding this in a bigger lens. And it takes time, but it's amazing.
Yeah, so I would put out the two dualities, the analysis synthesis, but also the differentiation, that's the parts, and then the integration, right? So we have that analysis synthesis and differentiation integration about this part-whole relationship of movement that really is the cornerstone of the whole program, but then specifically the final project in relationship to you as an individual.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I will say that you also are responsible for the book Everybody is a Body with Laura Cox, right?
Yes.
Because it's just an amazing book, and if someone hears this, I would
There you
say it's
go.
really amazing. Really, really like makes a very meaningful yet very simple way of looking at like the way the LBMS work is kind of like in everything and everywhere. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, movement is how humans experience the world, and so therefore how we structure the world.
yeah, definitely. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Hopefully we're gonna start this in July and amazing things will happen.
Yes, I really hope so. I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to come back to Israel and work with all those lovely mover, thinker, creative folks.
Especially these times.
Yes, exactly. Well, yes, if we're going to save the world, save the planet, we need to get back to the foundations of the lived, moving experience.
Yes. All right. I'm gonna stop the recording.